We're going to welcome back to the stage our Volunteer of the Year Award, Bev Uhlenhake of Epstein Commercial Real Estate, to give us an overview of the Bangor-Area market. Bev?
How are we doing today? I know you all just ate lunch. Are you awake? It would be great. All right. Where are we at? Okay. So today, as I do each time we talk about the Bangor market, I'm going to go over some numbers. I'm going to start out with the inventory and the vacancy in the industrial, office, and retail. I'll hit some trends. In particular, today I want to talk a little bit about waterfront and also what we're seeing in the greater region of northern and eastern Maine. And then I'll do some forecasting because Shelley tells me I have to. So I'll keep Shelley happy. Let's start with the industrial inventory. We track industrial in our market in 4 communities. That's Bangor, Brewer, Hamden, and Herman. Bangor's been the historical hub. It sits at about 4.2 million square feet of our 7.44 million square feet for the entire market. Things get interesting, though, when we start to talk about vacancy in industrial. You can see here that it's actually below 4% at this point. This next slide, I put this in here. Normally I don't carry it, but the red line in here is the entire market. But what you can see is as we track all 4 of those communities, they're all going down. The reduction in vacancy is not just one community or one building throwing off our markets, our entire market vacancy. It's the entire community, or the entire region. There are a number of, let me go back. There are a number of factors that go into our low vacancy rates right now. Obviously, the current upswing in the economy is not a bad thing. We like that. But the significant factor for our industrial market right now is paper. And particularly St. Croix Tissue in Baileyville. They've invested heavily, and they're just going gangbusters. We see their products in various stages as we're doing showings around the area. So they're filling it up. That said, has the vacancy caused increases in lease or sale prices or incentivized new construction? Yeah, but not really. A little bit of both. We do see that the lease and sale prices are firming up a little bit, and there have been a modest increase in the rates. However, with the cost of construction, and you've heard this a lot today, and I'll repeat it again, and I'll repeat it a couple times in my talk, that cost of construction, while we might see that slight increase in the cost in the lease rates, if the cost of construction is still too high, we're not going to see new construction, even though we need the space. So, and one other thing I wanted to say about our inventory. Typically, I do this presentation every 2 years. And so, generally, I get to talk about increases in inventory. This is a 1-year presentation because I was here last year as well. There's not a whole lot of change in inventory, so I'll just put that out there right now. Inventory in retail, office, and industrial are all about the same. So let's move to office. Again, inventory hasn't changed significantly. For those expecting the numbers to jump based on the Bangor Savings Bank, they happen to be sitting at my table. I expect all the tchotchkes after I talk about you so much today. Their huge project on the waterfront was not complete when we closed our data on October 31st. So I will talk about that a whole lot next year in terms of increasing our office inventory. The vacancy. Vacancy in the office market in all of the areas, very similar to the industrial market, has started to drop. The downtown market here in the blue appears to be high at 11%, but there are really 2 buildings in there that are skewing those numbers. Those 2 buildings are the Barry Dunn building, or former Barry Dunn building. That went under contract shortly after we closed out our data. So in that, they're in the 11%, but when we took them out for the 5%. The other large building in there, there's a 39,000 square foot vacancy at the UMaine System office. That vacancy is incredibly real. It's a very nice building, very vacant, but the size and the scope really don't fit our downtown tenants in Bangor, Maine. So do we have space available in downtown Bangor? Sure. Does it match tenant needs? Not always. Sometimes it's really difficult to find those matches, and it makes for interesting days of trying to get deals done. The suburban market that's shown here in red is getting closer to its typical low numbers. That's partly due to the filling of 6 Telcom Drive with a Penobscot Community Healthcare System. That deal was signed. It's a 36,000 square foot building, signed late last summer. They'll occupy it here in 2019. And then there were a bunch of other smaller deals that really filled up the marketplace. The medical office vacancy continues to remain low. It's still below 1%. We see a lot of investment in the medical office space. St. Joseph's Healthcare continues to expand their campus on Broadway. As I mentioned earlier, Penobscot Community Healthcare just leased out a 36,000 square foot building that they're about to occupy. And with Northern Lights, a new tower on the Eastern Maine Medical Center campus, you can see that healthcare continues to be very important for our economy and will be around for a long time. So overall, there's a good news in the low vacancy rates that we see in the office space. They firmed up the lease rates a smidge, but as we saw in the industrial sector, those lease rates, while they might be going up a little bit, the construction rates are too high to get that new construction. And it really makes it difficult for us to find new space for tenants. Landlords love low vacancy rates. They're thrilled with the low vacancy rates, but the reality is that for economic growth, we need a little functional vacancy, and we don't have it right now. Let's talk retail. All right, so you see the retail area here. We've got about 6.25 million square feet in our total market. A portion of that, about half of it, is in the Bangor Mall area. And I want to talk a little bit about the mall, and hopefully I do this in a way that you can follow. There are two things when we talk about the mall. There's the building. It's a 600,000 square foot-ish contiguous building, commonly referred to as the mall. And then there's the mall area, and that's the Stillwater and Hogan Road corridors. The success of the mall area and the mall itself, the building, was always assumed to be intricately linked, but we're not seeing that as much anymore. Let's talk a little bit about that. We'll wait for that for a second. The Bangor Mall, the building, as you know, has been in the news. I talked about it a little bit last year. We currently have 2 anchors remaining open there, Dick's and JCPenney, and Sears is closed, and the former Macy's is now a discount furniture store. There's significant vacancy in the interior mall. There are fewer national tenants. The look and the feel of the mall itself has changed. So the mall building and a couple other surrounding properties that are commonly owned are also owned by the same company, or were formerly owned by Simon, are now owned by MSCI, which is a company formed on behalf of the trustees of an $80 million loan that was defaulted upon. And they're now being managed by a court-appointed receiver, the Woodmont Company out of Texas. As I said last year, the Bangor Mall has a lot of chapters in its future. I don't even know if we finished the first one yet. So lots of things to go, and we'll see what happens with it. Let's look a little bit at vacancy rates. Let's first talk about the mall. As noted here on this slide, starting in the 2017 numbers, we took the Bangor Mall itself, that adjacent building, that contiguous building, out of the vacancy numbers because it was skewing it. So what we're seeing is we're now at about 7% in the mall area. That's the Stillwater, Hogan Road, and surrounding areas. That's really okay. 7% is a functional vacancy. It's not a bad thing. So what we're seeing is that things aren't going down with the mall itself. We see struggles in retail in Bangor, just like we do nationwide. I mean, those aren't rocket science. That's not new to any of you. So while we're seeing lower demand by quality national tenants, deals are still getting done. It's still happening. We're still doing okay at 7% vacancy. That area is a major shopping venue for the entire region, for all of northern and eastern Maine. People still drive hours to get to it. That's not going to end anytime soon. Vacancy rates in the downtown market appear to have gone up a little bit. They're up about 2%. I want to be clear, though, that those aren't in our prime areas on Main Street. They're slightly off downtown. And so if you go downtown, you're not going to notice a 2% increase in vacancy rate. It's still a very vibrant and active community. And our secondary locations, these are our neighborhood centers, our Broadway, Union Street, Hammond Street, Wilson Street, and Brewer. Those remain the steady players they've always been. We're at a 6 to 7% vacancy rate. The entire time we've done these numbers, it hasn't changed, and that continues. All right. So we've got some trends in forecasting coming up. We covered the numbers, but what are we really seeing in our market? And how do we feel about the near term? And first, let's talk about the waterfront. Here comes a little bit about Bangor Savings Bank. Isn't this a lovely picture? The most important development in downtown Bangor, or on the waterfront in Bangor, is absolutely, without question, the Bangor Savings Bank corporate headquarters. It's been under construction for a while. The location of it truly ties the downtown office market to the waterfront entertainment district. And so in addition, they're adding 450 spots in a parking garage, which will add to both the office market and the entertainment market. It's fantastic. And obviously with 500 employees at the corporate headquarters in one location, we're going to see new businesses going in, and they would like to take advantage of all those folks in one spot. What you see here is 24 Hamlin Way. This was an expansion/renovation project of what used to be known as 20 South Street. This is the building that's still under construction. It's 11 Hamlin Way. And these are all together on what they call the Founders Campus. Here's that same building at 11 Hamlin Way, only from the Main Street side, and you can see the garage attached. The lawn that you're seeing at the foreground of that picture is where the waterfront concerts are. So you think about how close that is and how it really ties downtown to the entertainment district. We're thrilled, and yes, I expect all the tchotchkes. So thanks, Bangor Savings folks, guys. We've been bullish about Bangor, for the waterfront in Bangor, for a long time. We continue to be so, not just about Bangor Savings, but a lot of other things happening there. We also expand that enthusiasm to Brewer. Here's a picture of Mason's Brewing. We talked about beer earlier. I'll talk about the real beer. This is good beer. In Brewer, the continued development of their Riverwalk, which is currently in the process of doubling the length of the Riverwalk, has attracted great businesses like Mason's Brewing Company, who's doing wonderfully. Another long-term vacant property there on the waterfront is currently under contract with another hospitality user. That one's going to be big news when it gets announced. And there are some other properties down there on the waterfront that are attracting hospitality users, and it's going to be fun to watch. And when you give the presentation, you can brag about your city. I'm pretty biased about the city of Brewer and what's going on the Riverwalk. This is the Riverwalk and a photo of the granite chessboards that are there in our children's garden. Those chessboards, by the way, were donated by the local realtor organization, so it's a great collaboration. This is going to be a really stunning and incredibly inviting area. So let's also talk a little bit about the greater region of northern and eastern Maine. Over the last decade, I've talked to you a lot about mill closures and some extreme job loss in certain years. And because Bangor is such a service center to those outlying areas, anything that was a great big wave out there in Millinocket and Lincoln and East Millinocket and all of those closures came crashing into Bangor. We felt it just as much, well, not as much as they did. I don't want to diminish what they went through, but we definitely felt what was going on there. But now we're starting to see real upswing in those areas, or real points of positive light. Remember, all of these mills were developed in areas where they weren't just out in the willy wags. They found a spot that had great water and had great potential for cheap electricity. Those are great things to have for potential new development. So let's start out with a little bit of lumber and paper. As I mentioned earlier, the mill in Baileyville is putting out a lot of paper, a lot of tissue. And in the last quarter of 2018, we learned that the Old Town Mill was being purchased by Nine Dragons. Some of you might recognize that name. They also own the mill in Rumford. So we know that they've already invested in Maine and have a plan to stay here, which is great. We were told to expect that those pulp machines at the Old Town Mill will be up and running in the first quarter of this year. In Millinocket, an organization called One Katahdin, which is formed by a group of folks who grew up there and want to see the area thrive again. They have taken over ownership of the mill there. They're slowly redeveloping it. They've been landing some significant development grants. This is not a tomorrow kind of thing. It's maybe the day after that. But the fact that we're seeing movement is great. In Lincoln, this is the site of the former Lincoln Pulp and Paper. They've recently made a deal for water with Poland Spring. Lincoln, though, makes the news a little bit more because of its opportunity zone. And I know there are opportunity zones across the state in a couple different areas. In Lincoln, the municipality itself is seeing it as real potential. They've already set up or are in the process of setting up the necessary accounts to put this into play, to put Lincoln into play. And I had lunch with one of their consultants yesterday who said, this is not about Poland Spring. There are some other things in the works. There are some really good things. So know that there are good things that are going to be happening in Lincoln, and they're going to take real advantage of those opportunity zones. Bucksport and maybe Belfast, if they can work through some of their issues, will soon be home to land-based salmon farms. Additionally, there are also some aquaculture, oyster farming happening in nearby Orland and Penobscot. These are significant. The new aquaculture technologies are sure to have an impact along the coastal areas of down East Maine, increasing our exports from the region. Locally, towns like Bucksport have already started to see processing facilities pop up. So we're going to get some of those value-added exports as well. All of these pieces, these are towns that most of you don't even know where they are. I'm honest. How many of you have actually been to Brewer? How many of you are going to Brewer after seeing those photos? You now have a personal invite from the mayor. All of the pieces in all of these outside markets throughout northern and eastern Maine are bringing up the entire region. These are the rising tides that float all the boats. And the service center of Bangor and surrounds is definitely benefiting. So let's talk a little bit about the forecast. There are definitely challenges in the market. We're not going to say that there aren't. As I mentioned before, as you've heard a number of times today, cost of construction is too high to justify new construction. There will be limited speculative construction. If I'm wrong on that, I'd be amazed. The tight vacancy rate, continued challenge to match potential tenant and buyer needs. It's also scary because if a big opportunity comes to us, will we be able to jump on it if there's not building space available? I don't know. We need to work on that. And then finally, in terms of challenges, I know this is not a real estate thing, but the lack of qualified employees, the lack of trained workforce is absolutely a challenge. It has the ability to threaten Maine's economic future. All right, so let's talk about opportunities. First, there's general strengthening of the rent rolls. Landlords seem to be able to secure slightly longer leases. They're getting a couple extra pennies on those lease rates. Not saying there's widespread rent increases, but those portfolios are slightly healthier. That makes the bankers happy. It makes the landlords happy. If you think I'm being intentionally measured as I talk about these rent increases, you're absolutely right. If any of you landlords call me tomorrow and say you want an increase in your rent, I'm probably going to tell you no. But it would be great. We're starting to see some things, but it's very gradual. It's gradual, folks. Second, we could see some limited construction. I don't want to rule out construction completely. We do have owner users who haven't been able to find something that fits them, so they're open to building. Those tenants that can pay a little bit higher prices might be open to some build-to-suit possibilities. That's definitely a reality. And then finally, that positive regional economic growth. As I've said, lots of things happening from Baileyville to Millinocket to Bucksfort to Belfast. This all means the potential for some jobs. That all means that we might be able to expect some offshoot businesses, some small businesses. That's all good. Again, rising tides lift all boats, so we're thrilled about that. Overall, we're excited about what's happening in the greater Bangor market. We definitely have some challenges, but there's some opportunities as well. And we're thrilled to see the renewed activity in northern and eastern Maine. So thank you all very much for having us, and I look forward to seeing you in Brewer.